All right, so get ready because today we're going deep into this world of darkness and lost memories
Ooh, okay.
with this memoir called Awake in the Darkness by Martin E. Smith.
Interesting.
And it's
What kind of memoir is it?
well, it's this firsthand account of
Yeah.
this guy, Martin, who wakes up one day and he has no clue
Oh, wow.
who he is or where he is or even how he got there.
That's terrifying.
It is. It's really unsettling,
Yeah.
but also strangely familiar in a way.
Hmm. I wonder what that is.
Yeah, and it really makes you think about like what makes us who we are, you know?
Right, like identity,
Exactly.
memories,
Yeah,
experience.
exactly. And the book doesn't even really follow a normal like chronological structure.
Really?
It's more like it kind of mirrors Martin's experience, so you're just thrown right into the confusion.
Oh, wow. So it's like
Yeah.
disorienting for the reader, too.
Exactly.
I like
Yeah. And right away, like from the very beginning, you're hit with this overwhelming darkness and this silence that's just so profound. It's almost like you can feel it.
Wow.
And Martin describes this like desperate struggle
Yeah.
to just piece together even the tiniest fragments of memories.
It sounds like a nightmare.
It does. It's like he's trying to grasp at smoke, you know?
I can imagine.
Yeah, and this sensory deprivation that he talks about is so important to understand,
Right.
like the psychological effects of what he's going through.
Absolutely.
Just imagine this. Oppressive silence,
Okay.
muffled voices that you can barely even hear,
Oh.
and you can't even speak yourself.
Oh, my gosh.
This totally distorts his sense of time,
Wow.
which just makes the anxiety even worse.
Of course. Yeah.
He even uses this phrase. He says time felt brittle.
Brittle.
Yeah, like it could just shatter
Huh.
at any moment.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it really is. It makes you think about how much we rely on like
Yeah.
external cues,
Totally.
routines.
Yeah. To mark time.
Yeah, and without those, time can just become so fluid and disorienting.
Like it loses its structure.
Exactly, like a physical substance that's just lost its stability.
No, I like that analogy.
Yeah, and without those anchors, his struggle to figure out who he is becomes even more
Yeah.
intense, more harrowing.
Yeah. Scary.
Yeah, he's grasping at memories, trying to remember loved ones, places, anything.
Anything familiar?
Yeah, just to give him some clue. And each time he comes up empty,
Oh.
it's like the impact of that memory loss just gets stronger.
Compounds. Yeah.
And then on top of all of that, there are these whispering voices that he keeps hearing.
Really?
Yeah, and he strains to try to understand them,
Yeah.
even mistakes them for footsteps at one point.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, it's eerie. It really makes you wonder, like, are these voices real?
Right.
Or are they just like a manifestation of his isolation and, you know?
Yeah. His mind kind of fracturing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good question. Yeah. Are they real or are they in his head?
Right. It's like, are they a glimmer of hope
Yeah.
that he's not completely alone?
Yes.
Or are they like a symptom of, you know, it's called apophenia?
Apophenia. What's that?
It's basically like our brains just
Yeah.
trying to perceive patterns and meaning where there aren't any.
Oh, I see. Like trying to make sense of things.
Exactly. Especially when you're in a situation like sensory deprivation.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. So it's like his mind is trying to fill the void with anything at all.
Interesting.
Yeah. But even with those unsettling voices, there are these tiny little signs of life that he focuses on.
Like what?
He mentions this faint rustling,
Okay.
a distant hum, like sounds that most of us wouldn't even pick up on.
Mm-hmm.
But for him, they become these lifelines.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he focuses on those sounds as proof that he's not completely cut off from the world.
That makes sense.
It really shows how adaptable our brains are, like how we're always searching for patterns and meaning,
Yeah.
even in just the smallest little bits of sensory input.
That's amazing.
It really is. It's like his hearing is compensating for his lack of sight. It's becoming hyper attuned to all these subtle cues.
Wow.
And he even starts to think of them as messages, like someone is trying to reach him.
Really?
Yeah, which really speaks to his determination, his refusal to give up.
Yeah. That's incredible.
There's this passage where he talks about feeling this surge of defiance, like he's refusing to be swallowed by the darkness.
Powerful.
He writes, I may not know who I am, but I know I'm still here, and that has to mean something.
Wow.
It's pretty profound, right?
Yeah, it is. He's like holding on to his very existence as a starting point.
Exactly, as proof that he hasn't been completely erased.
I wonder how he even begins to describe what he's feeling physically.
That's a great question, and it leads us to another fascinating part of his experience.
Oh, tell me more.
He talks about this constant feeling of being on edge, like his body is always braced for fight or flight,
Wow.
even though he doesn't even know what he's fighting or where he would run to.
Oh my gosh, so it's not just psychological.
Right.
It's like a physical response
Oh,
too.
right. Exactly. His body is mirroring the state of his mind, like trapped in this constant state of alertness.
That's so intense.
Well, it really is.
I can't even imagine. It's wild, right? Like his senses are feeding this primal fear,
Yeah.
even though he's not in any immediate danger.
Right. Yeah. And it makes me think about those voices again.
Huh.
Do they add to that fear or are they like a weird comfort?
That's a good question, yeah.
Because he keeps going back to them.
Yeah.
It's like they're both alluring and terrifying at the same time.
I get that. It's like a moth to a flame.
Yes, exactly.
Even though it could get burned, it's still drawn to it.
Yeah. And think about it in that kind of isolation. Any sound that even hints at another person
Oh, yeah.
would be terrifying and comforting at the same time.
Totally, because it's a reminder that you're not alone,
Right.
but it also shows you how completely cut off you are from interacting with anyone.
Yeah, and he can't even respond.
Real.
There's this really sad part where he's trying to talk, but nothing comes out. He
Right.
can hear himself think, but he can't make it come out of his mouth.
Oh my gosh. That's like being trapped inside yourself.
It is.
Makes you wonder about like consciousness and self-awareness.
Right.
If you can think and understand stuff but can't tell anyone,
Yeah.
like how present are you really?
It's a deep question for sure. It's like, what even is the self?
Exactly.
Like, do we make it by interacting with the world?
Or is it already there?
Yeah, or is it always there even without someone else to see it?
It's kind of a philosophical question, I guess.
It is, and it seems like Martin's really wrestling with that idea
Yeah.
throughout the whole book.
Makes sense.
He keeps trying to hold on to his identity,
Yeah,
remember faces, places, emotions,
of course.
but it's also broken up and hard to grasp.
Like pieces keep disappearing.
Exactly, like trying to put together a puzzle and the pieces keep changing shape
Oh, wow.
right in front of you.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and you were saying before about our brains always looking for patterns,
Yeah.
especially when we don't have much sensory input. Do you think that's what's happening with Martin in these voices?
Maybe.
Like he's forcing order onto all the chaos because he needs to.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Our brains don't like chaos.
They don't.
They want to make sense of things.
Right, and that makes me think about how fragile memory is.
Yeah.
Like how much of who we are is tied up in our experiences and the people we know.
Exactly.
And when those are taken away, it's like losing a part of yourself.
Yeah, a big part.
And that loss seems to make him even more desperate to understand what's going on.
That makes sense.
He says it feels like a jumbled puzzle,
Mhm.
but the pieces are disappearing or changing right as he's looking at them.
Oh, wow.
It's like the more he tries, the harder it gets.
That would be so frustrating.
You know, right? This cycle of confusion and frustration.
Yeah,
And it's all made worse by not having any senses to ground him.
exactly. Our minds can go to some pretty dark places without that.
And he definitely experiences that.
Yeah.
There are these really raw descriptions of fear and anger and just despair.
Heavy stuff.
It is. But even in those darkest moments, there's this little spark of hope.
That's good.
It won't go out.
Like he won't let it.
Exactly.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how he gets fixated on these super quiet sounds,
Like what?
like a rustling or a hum.
Okay.
He calls them his lifeline, like a connection back to the world.
That's beautiful.
It's amazing how in this state where he has no senses,
Yeah.
his other senses get like super strong.
That's incredible.
Our brains are so good at adapting.
They are.
When one sense is gone, the
Yeah.
others get stronger.
Like they're making up for it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like his hearing is making up for not being able to see.
So he's picking up on all these tiny things.
Yes, that most of us would never even notice. It's like his whole world has been boiled down to just these little sounds.
That's interesting.
And he's holding on to them like proof that he's part of something bigger.
Yeah, he's not alone.
Exactly. And he's not just hearing them, he's trying to understand them. Like, they're messages from someone trying to reach him. He's creating his own language out of these sounds.
Wow.
It's incredible how the human imagination works,
It is.
especially when we're going through something hard.
Yeah.
We're so good at making up stories,
Right.
finding patterns, even when there's not much to go on.
That's fascinating.
It really is. It makes you think about what you would do
Yeah.
if you were in that situation.
If I was in Martin's shoes, yeah.
How would you handle being so isolated and having no senses?
Oh, gosh.
What would you hold on to keep hoping?
That's a tough one.
And I think that's one of the best things about Martin's story.
Uh-huh.
It makes us face our own weaknesses.
Yeah.
imagine ourselves in that situation.
Right.
It's scary and confusing, and it makes you realize how much we need our senses and our memories.
Totally. To just be who we are.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is humbling when you think about it.
Uh-huh.
We just take it all for granted, you know?
Yeah, like it's all just there.
The feeling of the sun on your skin or hearing someone you love talk,
Exactly. And then you read something like this.
it makes you realize
Yeah.
how important it all is.
Totally.
And Martin's story really drives that point home.
It does, for sure.
Yeah, it highlights how crucial our senses are
Right.
and our memories in shaping how we see the world.
Absolutely how we see ourselves, even.
Yeah, and how connected we feel to everything around us.
Exactly. And what happens when all that gets messed up?
Right. It's like he's been stripped bare,
Wow.
forced to start over from scratch.
And figure out everything again.
Yeah, and he does it by focusing on these tiny sounds.
Yeah, those little hints of hope.
Exactly. So as we kind of leave Martin in this uncertain place, what do you think it would actually feel like
Oh, God.
to be in that situation?
I don't even know.
It's tough to imagine.
It is.
But I think Martin's story really reminds us of a couple things. First, how delicate our memories are,
Yeah.
and how much being cut off from our senses can change our reality.
Right? Like our whole world.
And second, it shows us how powerful hope is,
Mm-hmm.
even in the darkest times.
Yeah, that's really important.
It is. So I want to ask you, if you were suddenly in Martin's shoes,
Okay.
what's the first thing you'd do?
To figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Would you try to get your memories back?
I might.
Or would you try to make a noise to get help?
Maybe. Or I just listen like Martin,
Yeah.
trying to pick up any clues from the sounds.
That's a question we can all think about.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you're as intrigued by Martin's story as we are,
Uh-huh.
you should definitely check out Awake in the Darkness.
Read the whole thing.
Yeah, you'll get the full picture there, and it's a journey that'll stick with you.
It sounds like it.
It really will long after you finish the book.
Well, thanks for taking us on this deep dive.
Yeah, this was a good one.
It was really thought-provoking.
It was. And thanks to all of you for listening.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
See you on the next deep dive.